Okay, so you don't need me to tell you that the job market's pretty fucked. And you also don't need me to tell you that juniors are really struggling to get into strategy. So I try and speak to as many people as I can, but I don't always have time to speak with everyone. So I thought, why not create a resource that if I don't have time to speak to people, I can just point them to. This is that. So I wrote down just the things I usually say to people. This is not an exhaustive list. It's not a prescription. It is not a menu. It's more of a buffet. Pick two or three things, do that, see if it works. So, practical advice for junior strategists either trying to get into the industry or trying to grow within the industry. Um, let's go. So, first thing is turn stuff into stories. Wonderful skill to practice. It's very easy to just bring stuff to conversation or, say you're really interested about X, Y, and Z, but try and tell a story about it. If you're asked to do research, don't just bring a bunch of slides with things. Just like try and tell a story about what those things mean. Not because the story is always going to be right, but at least it helps you kind of put a stake in the ground. Read widely and weirdly. Yes, read the sources that the industry usually reads, but go weird, man. Read about things that might not even have anything to do with the industry, but those, I promise, will at some point come in handy. Be the person that has really strange media diets because that usually makes you very castable for certain types of briefs or projects. At the very least, it makes you more interesting. So read weirdly, not just widely. If you're doing presentations, 1 point per slide, don't try and overload it. You can always do another slide and make another point. Don't underestimate the cognitive load of seeing a slide with so many points and so many things, and people don't know where to turn. So if you're preparing a presentation, 1 point per slide, extremely invaluable advice. Playback to others. One of the best things I do now is just when I hear someone and they make a point or whatever, I just go, this is what I'm hearing. Is this fair? And you wouldn't believe the amount of empathy that you demonstrate by doing that because you're actively listening. And let me tell you a little secret. Sometimes we say things, we say things that we don't yet know exactly what they mean. So when you play it back, it helps me clarify. Practice framing. You'll work with tons of different people or meet tons of different people. They will interpret the same information in different ways and they will process the same information in different ways. Some people want more analysis and evidence. Some people want more examples. Some people want more just practical, memorable advice. Practice framing the same point in different ways because guess what? If you're going to be working in comms, it's exactly what you're going to be doing when you're working on audience-specific briefs. I like to speak in terms of because and by. Because is a wonderful shorthand to describe an insight, not just an observation. If I tell you someone does something, that's an observation. If I tell you they do it because of this reason, that is getting closer to an insight. So practice explaining why things happen, not just what happens. And then by is just like, if you're describing, for example, I want to grow mental availability of this brand, that's not a strategy, it's an objective. But if you say, I want to grow it by focusing on this particular attribute of a brand, that is closer to a strategy. And so practice speaking in terms of because when you're describing insights and in terms of by when you're describing strategy. Practice reverse engineering, right? Any piece of communications you see or any good idea you see, try and work out what the consumer problem there was and try and work out what the strategy there was. It is a phenomenal muscle to practice. Nail your exec summary. If you're doing a presentation, don't be afraid to lead with the conclusions, right? Because it helps you frame everything else that follows. It helps you command the narrative and it helps people understand what you mean, even if then the weeds and the detail are not quite there yet. It's really, really helpful. Go deep in plain English. It's very easy to start getting into jargon and feel intelligent. The best people I've ever worked with, they make very deep points in very simple terms. Practice that as best as you can because that is how good ideas travel in organizations. Assume your thinking is going to eventually reach the eyes of someone who doesn't do what you do and they need to understand what you mean. Talk it out. You'd be amazed how sometimes you write something in a presentation, it makes sense. As soon as you say it out loud, it makes no sense. Or there's something you immediately spot that isn't quite right. Record yourself presenting a point, see if it makes sense. talk to someone about it, see if it makes sense. It really, really helps kind of stress test whether what you're writing down is useful and the right thing to do. Um, Make boring stuff interesting. It's very easy for people to say they want to work on the exciting brands. Well, guess what? What your potential boss is probably struggling with is no one wants to work on my fucking insurance client. If you can find boring stuff interesting or find a way to make it interesting, trust me, there is a gap there that not everyone is interested in filling. And that gives you a really good way in. Um, if you're working on creative problem solving, focus on the problem, not the solving. I mean, sure, you're facilitating a discussion, trying to get to an idea and tactical executions and stuff, but your value is to bring people back to the problem, especially because it's going to get chaotic. So always bring it back to a clear problem, and that is the measure through which you know you're adding value. It's okay to be the person who just brings perspective from what we're here to do. Cross disciplines, right? Sure, you can think about T-shaped, but good advice is also to think about like an X. So like you cross this thing with that thing. I recently met someone. Oops. This is how I know it's just an AI, right? Because I just fucked up the microphone. Proof of reality, y'all. Um, I recently met someone who basically was a professional football player who studied sociology and did ethnographic studies in Gambia. And I was like, dude, if you bundle that into a way of positioning yourself for a research or strategy job, that is so unique. Use that because not everyone can claim to have those disciplines crossed in a single individual. There is something quite potent there. Feel it in your bones. Find ways to immerse yourself in the audience's lives or kind of capture firsthand what the audience might really be thinking rather than just knowing about it, because this is the difference between having knowledge about something and having confidence and kind of a deep feeling and authority that you've seen, you've witnessed someone saying something about this particular product or brand. Feeling it in your bones is the best feeling. Just knowing about stuff is okay, but in the age of AI, very commodified. Show your media diet. The amount of times I say to juniors, like, chances are you're seeing shit on your Instagram feed that most people have no idea. And that makes you potentially interesting to work with because, again, you're bringing a weird point of reference. Don't be afraid of talking about that because you can make up your lack of experience by just having a very wildly different media diet, which makes you useful for a process where you want divergence of thinking to get to the optimal solution. Generate momentum. Your job isn't to nail the strategy. Like, it's too early for that. And frankly, even more senior people, I've worked with CSOs who they don't get it right the first time, but they are just generating momentum around the conversation. They are facilitating people getting to the right answer rather than trying to do it themselves. Practice this as much as you can. Related to that, your job is to either help people make decisions or to help people debate. And sometimes you're not in a position to kind of go, you need to decide between this and that. That's fine. Bring pointed questions about what you're researching or the problem and debate it with people and capture what they say and then pull that back into a presentation. I think we underestimate the power of holding space in facilitation and strategy. And when you're a junior, that is a tremendous way to add value. If you're writing a portfolio, just demonstrate change. If you understand the totality of how the process works, strategic, creative, production, just point exactly where you added value, because that shows you understand how the process works and it shows you have a degree of humility of your role in the collective process. Don't try and oversell what you did because, don't just say you worked on client X, Y, and Z. Demonstrate how your contribution led to some sort of change. Even if it's just, initially my research helped people rule out that this option and that option wasn't really the right thing to do. There is value in helping people rule out options, not just kind of getting to a brilliant idea. Ask without judgment. My favorite podcast interviewer is Rick Rubin because he asks questions without judgment. Practice asking without judgment. Simple things. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? Is that right? Why is that right? This, ironically, means that you actually show up as very kind of wise beyond your years in a way, if you ask without judgment, because you're just kind of helping lubricate the conversation. Find a mentor, or better yet, find a portfolio of mentors. Find people who do what you want to do, but find people who have nothing to do with it, but are maybe adjacent. Maybe a good mentor for you is a creative director because they know what they need from a strategist rather than just a strategist who's obsessed about their particular part of the process. Find a portfolio of mentors. It's really, really helpful. And maybe even you have mentors outside of that, your field altogether, because that gives you perspective. Your job isn't to know all the things, it's to know how to find out things, right? When I say read weirdly and widely, I don't mean consume the entirety of the New York Times every single day. I don't mean consume the entirety of your Substack every single day. Just know where to go for sources, right? Um, this makes it less overwhelming, but also it again shows that you know how to shortcut your way into potential territories where you might find interesting clues about what to do. So don't worry about knowing everything, just know how to find out things. Also, in the process of someone going, oh, dude, do you have an answer to this? You go, I don't have the answer yet, but I know where to start looking. Don't underestimate how important this way of responding to a question is. Study the fundamentals. In this post, I linked to a few things. People always ask, what should I read or listen to about strategy? My first thing to say is don't just read or listen to things about strategy and marketing. But if you are going to listen to it or read about it, I've linked just a simple list, just places to start. And once you start there, trust me, you'll get into rabbit holes. But do study the fundamentals, because the amount of times people just assume that you don't need to know the history of your practice. You do. Your job is to use evidence and precedent to determine what to do next. It's not all that goes into your decision making, but make sure you know it. Have a brag book, right? Your confidence is going to have its moments where it gets hit. It happens to all of us. But having a brag book, having a list of things that people said about your work that were positive and who said it and why, I think is really helpful as kind of perspective gathering, especially when you make a mistake or something doesn't go well and you immediately start questioning your entire value as a strategist or as a person. When in fact, having a brag book allows you to remember that it's not you that's in the wrong. It's just in that situation, you did the wrong call. And that's okay. It's situational. It is not the entirety of your personality is now in question. The entirety of your integrity is now in question, or your value is now in question. And then last but not least, keep a swipe file. I think as more and more things get accessible through AI, practicing critical thinking and practicing taste is really important. And I find that keeping a swipe file is a great way of demonstrating taste and kind of knowing what your taste is, because you're saving ideas and executions you like, you're saving evidence that you think is good, etc. You're kind of building your own library of things that you want to either learn from or keep going back to, or just kind of, somehow share with others. I keep a pretty deep swipe file that I share with others through a paid community I run. But honestly, it really helps clarify, why did I save this? And what does that say about my level of taste? So keep a swipe file. It really shows, it helps you practice, especially if you don't have a place to practice yet, but it helps you practice kind of, what is it that I respond to, and try and understand why. And it's great stuff to talk about as well. Like when you're in interviews, like, this is what I'm really interested in. This is why. This is what I saved. This is what I like about it. I hope this is useful. If you've made it so far, congratulations, because it's not a short video. I'm trying to go against the trend of extremely short and kind of fast and snappy, just because I think sometimes you just need to sit with things. So I write more about this stuff on salmonlabs.co. If you made it so far, thank you, because, it means that you probably have a bit of an attention span, which is good, but also it means you're working hard to try and get ahead. So good luck with it. And I hope this is useful. Again, it's not a prescription. I'm not saying do all these things. I'm saying pick 3 and then see if those work. And then if they don't, pick a few others. Right. Thanks for listening/watching. Good luck out there.